Imagine the Gallagher with 25,000 people. It would be absolutely brilliant.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NUFC 360 podcast. With me this week, as ever, is Stephen and Ryan. We've got so much to talk to as the international break is here and everyone's just missing football already. I'm going to start with, did anyone see that bloke in Germany, second tier, pick up the ball?
No. I did see that, actually. No, you need to see it.
Stephen, for what you've missed, everyone at home very quick before we touch on Newcastle. The goalkeeper gets the ball. It's still in play. It's live. So he's picked the ball up and you think, oh, what was this video all about? He picks up the ball, rolls it to the centre-back, who then proceeds to pick up the ball and place it into the 6-yard box, thinking it was for a goal kick, and then gives away the penalty, which the keeper then saves.
I don't know what was worse, that or Ilan Mellier's howler.
That was funny.
I mean, horrific.
Yeah, that was really funny.
And they get pointed on the floor, but when you see replays, it looked completely normal. But we move on to Everton, which was not as exciting as that 10 seconds of Bundesliga madness. Odds even. Ryan, I'll come to you first. Do you think it was a fair result?
I think it was a better performance. I personally, I've had a few days, I guess, to reflect on it, but I was disappointed at the time. I think it was 2 points dropped, 100%. I was surprised at Everton's levels. I expected a lot more from them. I don't know. I think partly it's down to a better performance from Newcastle, but they're absolutely shocking, really.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, they've got absolute zero quality. I mean, there was no intention to win the game, personally. It almost felt like they were happy to take the draw. And I think as much as Newcastle were huffing and puffing, I don't think Newcastle would be too disappointed with a draw at the start of the game either. I think, you take a point away from home in most places, but I think given the scenario and given the quality of Everton and given the chances that we did have, especially the missed penalty, it felt like 2 points dropped to me. And I think there is positives again, like I was saying, the performance seemed a bit more structure behind the performance. We seemed better build-up play. Bruno back to his best, in my opinion, in terms of control in the game, and some better performances in there. But I think those are the type of games, really. If we do want to get to where we want to get to this season, we should be winning, really. Objectively, taking a step back, I don't think we're doing too bad. I think the performances obviously haven't been great, but I think they're slowly improving. We obviously want to turn that into wins. We've had 2 draws. You look at the Premier League and you look at a lot of these away games now, and a lot of teams struggle away from home in the Premier League. It's not just Newcastle. There's teams like Tottenham, for example, right? Who, I understand Tottenham's an extreme example, but teams like Aston Villa, for example, drop points at Ipswich. It is a competitive league, and to go away from home and win is hard. And I think, there's often an expectation on us that we should, be going to these places and wiping the floor with them. And I know we have been doing that in the past couple of seasons, bar last season, but, we have to be a bit more realistic, I think. Better performance, but not too happy with the result.
Yeah, it's a bit of a flip on its head, isn't it, Steve? Because we've been playing terribly and getting wins, and now our last 2 games is playing a lot better and getting draws. What positives did you see in the game?
Well, we saw the pressing back to a degree for the first time this season. We saw a lot more intensity. We as we grew into the game, we started off pretty sloppy, especially on the right hand side between Trippier, Schär, and Murphy. The passing was really off, and Schär was sloppy all game. We saw, I think, improved form. I think Ryan mentioned, we saw Bruno back to his best. That midfield, I think we all knew what the best midfield 3 was. Obviously, Gillett and Bruno and Tonali. And I think throughout that game, Everton's midfield was basically just not there compared to ours. Abdoulaye Doucouré was effectively trying to play as a 10, leaving Oral Mangala on his own against Bruno, Gillett, and Tonali. And it's why, we ended the game with 68% of the ball. And, Everton could barely do anything. There was one goal that was ruled off. That was their one real big chance.
Love it.
But other than that, I think, just like Ryan says, the performance is getting better. I think we'd probably agree that if we had a fit striker on the pitch in the form of Isak or Wilson, I think Wilson would have been perfect for that game, given how scrappy it was around their box.
Yep.
But I think if we had a fit striker on the pitch, we would have won that game. We created just over 2 expected goals in that game. I think 0.79 of it was the penalty. Why Anthony Gordon was the one to take the penalty, I will never know. Like, not only did the guy practice against Pickford in training for years at Everton, he practiced against him for England. You do not you give it to Cher. Even as rough as Cher was, give it to Bruno, give it to Joelinton, give it to Barnes. Barnes needed a goal. Give it to someone who isn't, under the emotional cosh of returning to the club that was so awful to him at the end. I think we should have done better with the penalty. Other than that, I think we only really created one really decent chance in the game.
Gordon again with that 1-1, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, I mean, Bruno had a miss from his left hand side of the D, and he sort of missed it to the right. Probably should have done better on that. I think Barnes had a rough game. Other than that, I think we're clearly missing that link up in the middle in games like this, where you just have someone like Isak who can drop a bit deeper, but then be on the end of those chances to finish it. The number of times where you see a ball go across, or we were getting to the byline a lot in this game. We were breaking down a deep block, which we haven't done very well under Eddie Howe. And we just needed that final touch on the ball, and you just think an Isak or Wilson just sticking a toe out half the time would have maybe applied that finishing touch.
Yeah, completely agree. Me and my dad were saying the amount of times that a ball was crossed in or just driven across the box, and you see like Barnes is nowhere to be seen, and the midfield where they're set up are nowhere to be seen. Isak, and particularly as you mentioned there, Wilson are the ones that will be there and be that pivot and be able to hold the ball up, because Gordon can't. He's good at spinning away. He's good at making the runs. Is he as lethal and as clinical? No, I think it's quite wasteful in comparison to both our strikers and Barnes, to be fair. I think Barnes is one of the best finishers that we have. And I was very surprised he was taking the penalty. And I wasn't very confident either. And it just wasn't one of them games. So in my match review, normally I'd kick and scream and shout over everything I can, but I just thought it's just one of those days. I was so surprised how little Everton had. I mean, I don't think they're a good team. And I think that Sean Dyche is the modern day, Brexit shithouse, your Sam Allardyce, Tony Pulis type manager. Their tactic was get the ball, whack it up to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and hope that what he gets pace. Because we weren't quick at the back, but they weren't hitting us with anything. It was a very bizarre game. But I thought it was a game of two halves. I thought in the first half we were quite sloppy. I didn't think we played well at all. I thought Joelinton in particular was quite poor. I thought Murphy was very poor all game. But then Joelinton in the second half, when we started pushing him further up on the left, him and Willock had a much better game. Looked like they were that season when we had Eddie Howe come through for the first time. I was going on my notes here. I've got Tonali pen, but I think no one's going to deny that was a stonewall pen, and so I'm happy they gave it. Were we looking to get away with the Dan Burn challenge on Dominic Calvert-Lewin? Right? Do you think there was a penalty?
Admittedly, I haven't watched it back too many times, but I don't think it was a penalty. I actually think it was good defending from Dan Burn. I think he gets his body across in front of the ball, and Calvert-Lewin clearly comes through the back of him. I mean, in real time, I was thinking, oh shit, we're in trouble here. Given that we've had a penalty and VAR's helped us out, kind of works that way at times, doesn't it? As much as we don't want to admit it, they'll give Everton a penalty to kind of to balance it out. But I mean, pre-VAR as well, I mean, referees used to sometimes, make a decision that the crowd would get on their back and then they, give a decision the other way to kind of balance it out. But I don't think it was anyway. I think it was actually good defending from Dan Burn, and I would be pretty upset if that got given.
If anything, like Dominic Calvert-Lewin should have done much better. He should have, gotten to it quicker and taken the shot quickly, rather than trying to wrap around it on his favorite foot. It's like watching Miggy trying to deal with the ball. It's always trying to get onto his favorite foot, and it just didn't work. And yeah, I agree. It was just good defending by Burn. Like Calvert-Lewin kicked him about as much as it ends up being.
I thought Miggy played well when we took off. And for me, I would start him in the next match, because as much as I really do, and I do like Murphy as limited as he can be, I thought Miggy was quite good for his build-up play. I think you mentioned before we started, Stephen, like at his level, because to me, Miggy's very wasteful. Takes a long time to get his passes away, or you can see the cogs, like Longstaff's, the cogs and the brain turning before he does the passing. But I thought his link-up play was very good.
Yeah.
And he was making runs into the box. I quite liked him on the right-hand side.
It's interesting that we've got this sort of we're clearly asking him to play slightly differently than we have in the last couple of seasons, right?
Yep.
Like you see him now. He cuts inside and he sort of runs across the box a lot more recently when he's been coming on, and it's been causing havoc for some teams because they don't know who's going to pick him up. Is it a midfielder is it someone transferring the man marking, or is it a centre back need to step out? I've liked the way we've been using him. I think I agree. I think we should start him in the next game.
I think, yeah. I mean, you saw that against Wimbledon, kind of an example you were saying there, Stephen, where he kind of came central and actually did well and played Usula in behind. Was it Usula or someone he played in behind anyway? I have to admit, I think Murphy's been a little bit unlucky. There's been games where there's been red cards and he got taken off early. I kind of expected more. He had a really good preseason. He was probably our best player in preseason. I kind of expected him to not necessarily have a breakout season, but I was expecting a little bit more from Murphy. I think he's been missing in a lot of games, and I just think, to be honest, I think it's kind of showing off our failures in the summer market are kind of are being shown in the games that we're playing. Right, we're struggling to break teams down. I'm finding, that we don't. And I don't know if it's a confidence thing, it's injuries, it's consistency. Where we've typically been a free flow and attacking team and scoring goals at ease, it seems to we don't seem to have that fluency going forward at the minute. It seems to be huffing and puffing and trying, and I think we lack a little bit of creativity as well at times in the midfield. I think Tonali coming in makes a big difference, but I think Joe Linton isn't a creative player.
But does it make a big difference? I was literally about to say, my dad mentioned this, saying we're not breaking them down. My understanding was that Tonali was meant to be this creative player, and I'm yet to see him create chances. I'm yet to see when he I was told he makes loads of chances, and I'm not seeing anything like that from him.
Not really. I mean, there was always this sort of fallacy about him. Sort of people used to compare him to Andrea Pirlo because he had the long hair and he played in the sort of. But when he joined, there's a few journalists who pointed out quite rightly, especially on the Athletic, right, that the real comparison for him was Gennaro Gattuso, and it definitely fit the model of where we were going as a team, with having a more physical, combative midfield. And he can be quite creative in the right circumstances. Like he's a good set piece taker when everything's in free flow. If he was able to be a part of a team that's playing with confidence, I think that's the big part that we've not seen this year. Is we've just been playing with such little confidence that they haven't been. We haven't been brave. Like Ryan, you mentioned like some of the difficulties we've had, breaking teams down. Against Everton, we were playing better. We started playing with some confidence, and we started to see us break them down a bit because we were making braver passes. We were attempting things that we haven't this season, or for large stretches of last season. I think that's been the big thing. Is when we have a team that's settled, that can play with that confidence, have the confidence to take a man on, to make the extra, to make the ambitious pass, rather than just be a bit worried about making a mistake and play it sideways instead. I think that's when you'll start to see us. We'll have a much better time breaking teams down, and you'll see like the value of like Tonali being on the pitch. Like we saw against Wimbledon and against Everton, is that he will try those balls, the sort of slide rule passes in between the centre back and the full back for a winger to run onto. But you can just see that there's not that connection with him and Miggy or with Murphy yet that Bruno had with Miggy like the last 2 seasons, right? And I think that's what we need. We just need that sort of settled chemistry.
Do you think Howe's struggling with his best team right now as well? Because I think there's a few positions where maybe you've kind of got the Trippier-Tino debate, who's better, who's more. I know there's games where Tino's more suited than Trippier and vice versa, but it's that settledness. I think that season we did so well as you could pretty much name the squad week in, week out, right? You knew what you were going to get and who was going to play. Right now, there's a few positions, again, the Mickey Murphy side. Is Tonali going to be in the side? Is Willett going to come in? Is Longstaff going to come in? Striker injuries as well, missing 2 of our strikers. And I think it's been a bad look, but I also think we're struggling for that, to find that consistency. And that also comes from selection as well, in terms of patterns of play and then game time ultimately for players.
I think he showed that his preferred midfield is Joe Linton, Bruno, and and Tonali. I think the other problems that we've got on the pitch are the good problems. Like, who do you start? Who's better, Gordon or Barnes? Who's worse, Miggy or Murphy on the other side? But yeah, I agree. I don't think if we were betting, we wouldn't know what team would start. We have educated guesses, but he keeps nodding to Trips, which I prefer Tino. Hall, he's had a few good games now, so I'm not changing my mind entirely, but he's showing why he's starting. He's not looked as he's shown, for me, Hall has shown a lot more defensive nous, and he's been a lot smarter in his engagements, so he hasn't been caught out as badly, which has been quite positive. So
I think part of that as well, though, is that we've clearly tweaked the shape a little bit. Because like when he's had his real struggles, he was sort of playing as a traditional left back, Hall. But in the last few games, when he's started to play a lot better, it's when he's, rather than playing wide and pushing high and trying to sort of link up with Barnes or Joelinton or Gordon. It's been when he's been playing that role that Byrne has for the last couple of seasons. He's been playing as sort of like a left centre back, or sort of tucking in and being a sort of recycling point for the midfield. So, you see Bruno clearly trusts him, that if they need to sort of recycle, move it around a bit to try to open up some space, they'll give it to Hall quite a lot as well. I think on the best 11 point as well, I think we're starting to get there. You're starting to see like individual positions are starting to get locked down. Hall's, I think it's fairly safe to say Hall's locked down left back for now. I think we know that what the preferred midfield three is. Ideally, a fit Isak or a fit Wilson would start in the center of the front three. Clearly, we're favouring Murphy a lot so far this season, but you don't know whether or not maybe if Isak's back, does Gordon go out to the right? And I think that one thing we noticed last season and the season we finished fourth was that Howe mentioned a few times, right, that he's happy to rotate the midfield and the front three, but he doesn't like rotating a back five.
Oh, no one ever does now.
And it's reasonable. It's a perfectly logical stance to take. That's the basis of everything we want to do. Everything starts with us from the back. Either it's a long kick, or if it's shares passing, or if everyone's fit, it would be Botman's long range passing or Hall's passing into midfield. And I think that once either Tino gets to the sort of technical level that he can sort of fully take Trippier's place permanently, I think we'll then have the settled back five, and then until Botman comes back, and then it just comes down to, like you say, like who's running hot at the moment. Yeah. We should have two players for every position on the pitch, and then we can just rotate them as and when we need for load management.
Step in the right direction, I think we can all say. And boo international break. It's always crap. So news this week came out as well in the last few days that there have been positive meetings between X, Y, and Z in Newcastle. So plans to redevelop St James's Park or move the stadium. Numbers have been bounded of 800 million, 1 billion, a lot of in the nose chirping up and saying this is going to happen, that's going to happen. But the question to you two, because I'm not local, if anyone can tell, Ryan, would you be unhappy if Newcastle decided to build the Aramco mega 70,000 seater stadium? Spurs stadium's a crock of crap now because ours are so nice, new and shiny, just behind St James's, or would you prefer to try and do their best with St James's where it is now?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, it's the whole idea of being in the city centre, right? I think it would definitely soften the blow for a lot of people if it was built right behind St James's Park. Whether it can be done, I'm intrigued to see. It's never quite that easy, is it? There's obviously loads of ideas floating about, like pushing the pitch back or moving the pitch in a different direction and whatever. I think I do understand the need for people. The feel, the need to progress. In order to progress, we need to move to a new stadium. There is things that a new stadium would bring and open up opportunities commercially. Being able to do things like the NFL, like Tottenham Hotspur do, which is probably a good money earner, and some of the concerts you could bring outside of football. But there is a few things that I'm still a little bit hesitant on in terms of, are we going to be, as fans, the ones that are going to then be repaying back the cost of the stadium through, increased ticket prices, season tickets jumping up in price. And I want to make sure, I hope it doesn't get to a point where just because we've got this new stadium, it doesn't become a super commercialized bull of an arena, and St James's Park has that history and that atmosphere and that tradition. Whereas, if it could be expanded, it would be nice to see. But then also at the same time, if you're spending 800 million just to add 10,000 seats to St James's Park, you might as well go and build a new stadium anyway. But I just think, the main thing for me, like I said, I don't necessarily think it's about capacity and all that sort of stuff. I just hope that the club remembers the core fan base and make sure they don't lose touch with that core fan base by, overpricing things, commercializing things too heavily.
Yep.
To the point where it no longer becomes an enjoyable match day experience or an inaffordable match day experience for your average fan, because football's already too expensive as it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be surprised. I mean, because Saudis don't seem like they're too precious with their money. It's more about the image. So I'd be very surprised if it was like all of a sudden, $2,000 for a season ticket or.
No, but I think it's more tied into that again, which we'll talk about, no doubt. But PSR and all this sort of stuff, right? How much money can you squeeze out of revenue in terms of ticket prices? That can generate an extra 2, 3, 4 million a year, maybe. But anyway, sorry for interrupting, but yeah, you get what I mean.
Oh, you will be. With moving to because I'm not local. Obviously, I love St James's Park, but if it's right behind, the issue that I have with any new stadium is they seem to lose that we're over the top of you. And this is a horrible place to play. Like Tottenham Stadium's lovely. It looks amazing, but the fans are like nice, spaced out. They're not anywhere near the pitch. West Ham's is the worst stadium in the league. That wasn't a purpose-built one for football. But do you think if they were to build a stadium on Leeds Park, for example, that they would keep in mind what makes St James's Park such a special place and why the Newcastle fans are feared by opposition by coming up here to play?
I like to think so. I think a couple of things that we can say about the club since the takeover has been, for them by and large, they have done a number of things to try and make the experience for fans better.
Yep.
Whether or not they've always come off is an entirely different topic, but they have made moves to try and make the match day experience better for the match going fan. There's obviously a financial opportunity there. To not just to move, but to improve the offering that's in the stadium. But one of the most important aspects commercially for a stadium, for any sports team, regardless of the sport that you're in, it's called spend per visit. Effectively, it is how much the average fan, the average match-going fan or attendee, will spend in a visit at a stadium. That's why you see at Spurs, the average fan spends, I think it's well over £100 per visit on average. Obviously that includes some of the high price seats, and there'll be corporate visitors who will also spend money. But a big part of it is the concessions and the concourse at that ground is such that you can stay in there. You get your food, you get drinks. Like you say, it comes in quickly. You can get access to Wi-Fi. There's on-site facilities to spend money. And I think that's a big aspect of driving commercial income. Another part of it, obviously, would be how it affects ticket prices. And I think a big part of it, obviously, like Ryan, you mentioned, is whether or not we as fans would be asked to pay the difference. I go relatively regularly with my dad to St James's to watch home games when we can get tickets. And oftentimes, obviously, we know the demand is there because obviously they're talking about replacing the stadium, and we see the queue every time you book tickets. There's 60,000 people waiting for the general sale pretty much every time that goes on. So the tickets go on sale. We pay, my dad and I, we pay Platinum Club tickets because they sell out slower, and you still get a good view, but they're a little bit more expensive. And I think the problem obviously is that if we get a giant shiny new stadium that costs a couple £1 billion, is that then going to result in season tickets that are £2,000 a year? Right? And are we going to end up price gouging the fans and whatnot? Are you going to end up effectively paying Arsenal prices or Spurs prices or Chelsea prices for your tickets? That's obviously what you don't want. And obviously there will be regional pricing based on the average income here is a lot lower than it is in, say, in London or the average income in central Manchester and stuff like that. So there will be some regional pricing there. But I think ultimately, outside of the commercial aspects, I'm all for moving stadium if it is in Leeds Park behind St James's. St James's we so desperately need better facilities.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff there, not just for fans, but also for the groundsman and for the team itself. They need better facilities. They need better technology in the ground so that they can better make use of everything that is available to football teams. One of the biggest things for me is, like we say, what matters is the seating. If we want to use a new stadium for multiple venue activities like concerts or conventions or NFL games, for example, there will likely that would probably necessitate a more spread out shape.
No.
Which I agree. I don't like the idea that I would rather sacrifice some events and have a much more football oriented space. I've mentioned it outside of the episodes in the past. We were talking about this recently in our group chat, right? I give me the Westfalen Stadion on time. Give me the Dortmund Stadium. Give me like the Südtribüne in their stadium. It's the biggest single stand in Europe. 25,000 people. Imagine the Gallagher with 25,000 people with giant tifos and all that, loads of flags flying throughout the game. It would be absolutely brilliant. Or you look at like the Bernabeu, the new Bernabeu. They've got, despite all the events they've got going on there, they've still got basically vertical seating.
Yep.
Like, it's so high. And it's so close to the pitch as well. Sometimes it feels. I think that's the main thing. Is that you need to feel like you're close to the pitch. You need to, if you're as home fans, we would want the opposing team to feel sort of claustrophobic. You want the noise to be oppressive. You want the space to be oppressive for opposing teams. Whether or not the PIF want to spend several £billion and get some really fancy futuristic set of stands that can sort of spread out when it gets like a larger footprint in a ground or some sci-fi nonsense like that. I've used an example with you guys in our group chat before. In the NFL and MLS in Seattle, they have I think it's called Lumen Field now is the name of the stadium. The stadium there is designed to enhance acoustics.
Yeah.
So it's designed to make the stadium noise louder. That's another thing I'm really keen on. I want St. James's or whatever the new stadium would be to just be loud. I want it to be by design a fortress that you have to visit if you're an opposing team, and then keep everything else secondary, like the piecemeal pitch that can come apart and sink down into the ground to make way for an NFL pitch, and all the other facilities for like concerts and stuff that can come second.
Yeah, I think when people, I mentioned it to my mum and dad, and they're from the area, and when Sue said, "Oh, mum, we might be moving," no, we can't move, and I think a lot of fans it's heart overhead, and I get it. It's the cathedral on the hill.
I was just about to say that, actually, to summarize mine. His heart says no, and my head says yes. I mean, yes, in the sense that
I just think
commercially it makes sense. And I think it's a place that's so iconic. I
think it's a bit harsh there, but I think it's a bit arrogant for people to say that we can't leave because there are bigger teams and more successful teams than us that have moved. Arsenal's the most recent example I can think of a big team moving. I mean, Spurs, but Spurs. But Arsenal leaving Highbury to then go to the Emirates, and it's been pretty much a success. They're completely different stadiums, but the examples you gave there, Steve, the Bernabeu gives me hope that they can, because I've been right at the top of the Milburn stand, like sat touching the back wall, and you still feel fairly close to. We can still see clearly what is going on the pitch, and you're part of the atmosphere. And they do need to keep that. I personally cannot see them staying at St. James's. I really, really can't.
It does feel like the language of what they've been saying as a club, right? It just suggests that they're laying the groundwork to announce that they're going to move. Saying things like, "Oh well, if we're going to spend £1 billion revamping or several hundred million revamping St. James's, is that the most sustainable option? We're looking at everything." And then you look at the recent appointment by the club on the board of I'm just trying to find his name quickly. Roger Thornton, the real estate investor who's local to. He operates in Newcastle and deals with large scale property developments. Everything just seems to be screaming, "We're moving stadium." One thing we'll look at is we know that Darren Eales is leaving the club whenever they find a successor for him. I think one of the defining things that will be his legacy, basically, will be ensuring that we stay in the city centre. I can't see us moving. I think that given the reports, there've been reports in the past, in the last few months, of the Saudis sort of reaching out to the northeast councils to sort of investigate into, should we can we fund anything? Can we invest here? I think there's enough local relationships and enough money involved that it would be ludicrous for the city council to be like, no, even if you promise to change it back to Leeds' the St James's Park footprint into a large green area, no, we don't want several £billion invested in the region, because we have to remember that this feasibility study is not just the stadium. It will be a huge training campus as well. You expect something on the scale of the Etihad campus that City have, hundreds of millions of pounds just in a training facility and a secondary stadium for the youth and the women's team. Like, there's so much money involved that you can't see it not happening. The money's there. The political will, I think, is there to just make it happen. I think it's almost inevitable at this point.
Yeah, I think it will. I do think it will, and I think, like what Ryan was saying, I think people will, if it is right behind it, because they thought they looked at that before they did St James's Park into what we see it today, didn't they? There was a big hoo-ha about if they were going to do it there and then. I'd be very surprised, because, as you say, at half time at Spurs, the reason why you do go get a pint and you do go get food is I can go get it and I'll be back in my seat before kickoff. And I don't mind spending my 25, 30 quid, because that's just nice convenience. I'm going to go there. The food's better. The beers are quick. And that's what older stadiums lack, because obviously it's what the new ones do. Lastly, and very, very short, very tiny short bit on, because I hate talking about acronyms. It's the worst part of football these days. Man City won a thing. They did a thing in a court against the Premier League, but yeah, won. So apparently we can now possibly get more money into the club. I personally can't see it happening. It's called APT, Associated Party Transactions. You can add it to the rest of the VAR and PSR and JFK and everything else. And FFP that goes along with it. WWF. And do we think anything's going to change? One word, preferably.
I think for me, the main thing I want to say is not interested in it whatsoever. Yeah. And I hate the way that it's going. And for terms of football now, you've got people sitting here and talk about football. That's what I miss, you know what I mean? Talking about what we've just done there, 20 minutes on how Newcastle are playing, what players are doing well, not 187-page documents detailing what Man City's legal argument is against the Premier League and what the Premier League's saying, and then what this is going to mean, and VAR, and you spend more time talking about VAR than you do again talking about the games and stuff like that. And it's just becoming a bit of a drag, really, to watch. And I'm starting to lose a bit of interest as a neutral now in football, because I'm not interested in these things. I grew up watching football because I liked watching football. I liked watching players. I like watching players who are fun to watch. Players like Ronaldinho. And I'm not going to get into tactics now, but football's robotic. Everything's so system driven and so tactically driven, and you got these teams that are, just I'm going to stop there. So I'm going to stop there, but I think, basically what I think is still a load of shit, and I couldn't. I don't. So I hope,
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, I'll read about it in 2 weeks when someone summarises it, and no doubt nothing will change. But if it does change and it changes for the better for Newcastle, then great. All for it. But I can't see things changing at the end of the day, because I think, it's just gonna open a can of worms, and it'll just be back and forth. No team's gonna go down without a fight, others. So
I would vote you for president, Ryan. That's exactly how I feel. I think a lot of people feel about everything, tactics, players, everything. I think that kind of summarizes where we are.
I think the likelihood of anything really changing is low. To very briefly sort of explain it for those who don't know anything about football law and regulations. Obviously, APT is the Associated Party Transaction Rules, which prevent owners who own companies from using those companies to sponsor football clubs. But these rules happen to come in just after our takeover. The recent court case that both Premier League and City are claiming that they individually won, effectively, the only meaningful thing that could affect us is that the burden of proof on us to prove that our commercial deals are fair market value is no longer on us. It will be likely after the next Premier League meeting, whenever the hell that is, it will likely be moved to the Premier League, which is where it should have been in the first place. There will be some other rule changes, hopefully, that lead to some more transparency, but I'm not holding my breath. Ultimately, I can't see. I don't think it's going to lead to us earning loads more money. Like Ryan says, it's just we wanted to very briefly touch on it. I'd rather not spend 30 minutes talking about football regulations. As much of a nerd about football as I am, there's only so many pages of a 168-page decision by a court in front of retired judges that I can really sit through and still maintain any kind of focus.
I don't know. I've seen your Football Manager spreadsheet, and it's it is shocking.
Yeah, but that's numbers. That's stats. That's numbers. That's not law. That's not law and legalese.
The two things I'll say quickly on it is nobody cared about fair market value, and Mike Ashley was paying us fuck all for his advertising around the stadium. Associated party transactions is the only form of sustainability that you can guarantee. Does it matter if the Saudis want to give us £1 billion? If they give us a sponsorship deal going, Aramco sponsor St. James's, 500 million a year for 10 years, then you know what income we've got. You know what we can spend. That is the definition of sustainability. Not knowing what's happening tomorrow is not sustainable. So when they're trying to say it's about sustainability, it's clearly not. I've gone so red, but clearly not, because sponsorship deals are so goddamn sustainable because you know to a penny how much you're getting, and it's infuriating. But if you've enjoyed today's podcast, do drop us a like, share, and subscribe. Thank you both for joining me. We're going to go cry now, and we'll be back next week, no doubt, discussing our match against Brighton, the Encumber Minter derby, as it's been touted as. And comment below what's your favourite acronym in football. But until then, thank you, everyone. Take care. Goodbye.